So welcome. Thank you for coming to this panel. As was just said, I'm Stephanie Pace-Marshall, and I'm privileged to serve as your moderator. I think we are here, having gone through a spectacular evening last evening and a wonderful morning, because we hold a collective recognition that the issues facing education for all children, equity, access, and quality, have never been more essential to human capacity and talent development and to prosperity, and they certainly have never been more urgent. We're also here because we believe that education is the one human endeavor that grounds, connects, and advances all others, because it is the crucible for shaping minds, and the nature and quality of how we think and how we think shapes the world. Why and how our children learn shapes their identity, their sense of self, efficacy, confidence, resilience, courage, and capacity for empathy, challenge, and risk. In large measure, what our children are invited to learn by design and how they are invited to learn it and with whom shapes who they become, and who they become shapes the world. Mind shaping is indeed world shaping. And engagement in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics profoundly shapes the nature and quality of the 21st century global mind. We shape the world from the inside out. Science and mathematics are the languages and the currency of innovation and invention, and all our children must be able to speak them fluently. Well, our panel today takes a deeper dive into one dimension of the global educational crisis, understanding the root causes of the marginalization and inequitable participation of girls in STEM, and what we can do to change it by design. We want to illuminate the challenges, but our focus is on innovative programs and policies that can be shared, adapted, and scaled at multiple levels. We all know the international and in-country statistics with respect to the significant underrepresentation of girls and women in STEM. We know about educational access, attainment, and careers. We also know the pervasive myths, stereotypes, and gender biases that collectively weave a toxic narrative of inferiority and diminished capacity with respect to girls and whether or not they are smart in science and mathematics. Despite research to the contrary, the dominant belief that girls are simply not very good at math and are not interested in STEM persists. Why? I believe because initially, narrative trumps data almost every time. For me, this has become a deep-seated form of identity theft of the worst kind. Once these narratives are reinforced through lived experience, they become cognitively embedded and wired, both in individual and collective consciousness, and they are very difficult to change. So our mandate is clear. Given what we now know, we simply can no longer do what we now do. Einstein was right. The thinking that created the problems we now have will not be able to solve them. We must think anew. And that's what we're about in this panel, and that's what we're about in the next 2 days. A radical rethinking. His Highness gave us permission to do that last night. He said, think courageously, and I don't think we want to disappoint him. So we have 3 questions that we are going to grapple with, and we'll try to be as interesting and provocative. We'll be the perturbers, we hope. What are the barriers that impede or deny access to STEM learning and career advancement for girls, and what can we do about them? What are the innovative programs that show promise for increasing access, participation, and engagement in STEM learning, education, and advancement for girls? And what are the policies and partnership initiatives, mandates, and incentives that have been shown to accelerate and expand promising practices and bring them to scale? To get us started, many of these panels are beginning with what's called a STIR innovator. And I would hope our STIR innovator, is Dr. Indira here? Yes? Okay. Following Dr. Indira's remarks, I'm going to introduce our distinguished panel. Each one, regrettably, has 3 minutes to offer everything they have ever known and done about this subject. Insights, reflections, recommendations, so we'll be done by the time the panel is over. We'll have all the answers. And then you will have an opportunity also to ask questions, and we hope you make them not softballs. This is truly a panel of experts, and I know they're ready for the really hard questions, so please do that. But let me first introduce our STIR innovator, and then I will introduce the panel following her presentation. STIR, by the way, if you did not know, which I did not, is an acronym for Schools and Teachers Innovating for Results. It's a not-for-profit. It's an organization with a very powerful mission to build a movement of teacher change makers who improve children's learning and also to catalyze what they're calling a surrounding ecosystem of partners to support them and to sustain them. Dr. Indira is part of that initiative, and she will speak to her work in a very brief time, as we all will be, and we welcome you and thank you for being our STIR innovator. Please come up.
Thank you. It's a great privilege to present my very small attempt to such distinguished gathering. My name is Indira, and I work in a government-aided school in Delhi. The school mainly caters to children from economically weaker sections. The school is an English medium school, and for these children, English is as good as a foreign language. Outside the four walls of the classroom, they do not encounter the language anywhere. They do not read the language, they do not hear the language. And since it's an English medium school, it becomes a great barrier for them to master all other subjects also. And over the years, it saddened me to see that many of the children were quite intelligent and they had very good numerical ability, but they could not do anything on the paper because once the printed paper is given, they are as good as being illiterate. So I said this must be the problem, it must be first addressed. So I had this idea for a long time, and then STIR Education has supported me in this. I simply call my method as Converse. The whole idea is if you want your child to speak in English, speak to him or her in English. So I started from the basic class 1 level where the children even do not know the phonics. What letter gives which sound. They are still in the old, age-old methods of just mugging up CAT, cat and MAT, mat. And once they know A to Z, they are able to read A to Z, but they do not know how to string them together to make words. So I started with that, and I had to train the teachers also, because the teachers themselves did not know how to make the children speak in English or how to make them read in English. So initially, I introduced this only in my branch where I'm working. We have 7 branches in Delhi. Then seeing the difference it made in a short while, I was asked to implement this in all the 7 schools. So I have a project running now for 1 year. At the end of this academic year, the feedback has been very, very encouraging. And now, so I can call myself a change maker. The changes I brought about are, first of all, a change in the mindset of the people, that this is a problem that has to be addressed first. And second, right, and the changes, the second change you can say is in the attitude of the children, who now feel that this is just a language like any other language. And this has, to a great extent, helped them overcome their diffidence and their lack of confidence, and maybe even a kind of inferiority complex they had earlier about their academic performance.
Thank you. Thank you. You may. Thank you very much. STIR, as you can tell from Dr. Indira's comments, at the level of scale of change makers are working with individual children, not only change making in teachers, but these micro interventions that enable every child to be successful. We thank you for that. Let me begin now by introducing our panel. The order will be Amanda Jenkins will speak first. Amanda is an advisory board member for the Jarkey GEMS Foundation, which, as you know, we have talked about a lot and is one of our primary sponsors. She has worked for 2 decades with Lloyd's Insurance Market, held senior roles in two New York law firms, enabling her to work with disadvantaged youth in Harlem and New York City. She's a trustee of the Family Action Network and head of her own family foundation. Sally Geer will follow her. She is the Senior Education Advisor for the Department for International Development, leading girls in education for the British government. Sir Michael Tomlinson is the former Chief Inspector of Schools and former Chair of the Hackney Learning Trust, where he led the transformation of secondary education in the UK and continues to do so, and you will hear some of his newer efforts. And finally, Shabana Bashir Suresha, co-founder and president of SOLA, School of Leadership in Afghanistan. You heard her stunning and inspiring performance last night and her conversation with us. SOLA is a not-for-profit that helps exceptional young Afghanistan women to access education worldwide and then to return to jobs in Afghanistan. So would you please join me in welcoming our distinguished panel. Okay, we are going to begin with Amanda. You've heard all the 3 questions relative to barriers, practices, policies, but having structured that in such a linear, reductive way, which is not science, the kind of science we're talking about, you can go wherever you want to go. So,
thank you, Stephanie.
Welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon. And as a member of the Jarkey GEMS Foundation panel, I'd like to add my welcome to everybody here this weekend. Now, clearly, we have an enormous shortage of STEM graduates globally. I come from the UK, and here it's been calculated that we actually need to double the number of engineers every year graduating from 20 to 40,000.
Wow.
Also in the US, it's been predicted that the demand for STEM qualified employees will rise 4 times more in the STEM sector compared to any other. Now, this massive problem is actually also a massive opportunity for women. In fact, the Harvard Business Review called women a business opportunity as big as China and India combined. Now, at the moment in the UK, women equal 46% of the workforce, but only 15.5% of the STEM workforce. 6% of engineers in England and the UK are women. The US do a little better with 15.5%, but compare this to China, 33%, and Estonia, 44%. Clearly, the female population needs to be represented in the STEMs. For instance, the airbag designer couldn't understand why there were so many fatalities after his airbag was deployed. Finally, he realized that the people dying were women and children, and they were dying because his calculations had been based upon his male adult weight. So what can be done? First of all, we need to start with role models. Whose daughter here today has heard of Virginia Apgar, Marie Curie, or Elizabeth Arden? Now, we have some illustrious educators here today, but I'd just like to make a couple of observations. For instance, something has to be done to stop the 10 to 18% of STEM undergraduates dropping out each year. And in the UK, half of all the schools have not one girl at the moment studying physics A-level. Maybe in schools we need to think about STEAM, not just STEM. For instance, Leonardo da Vinci was one of the greatest artists of all time, but also one of the greatest scientists. Now, encouraging girls into STEMs is a lifelong journey. We need to start with baby steps, and that starts with the parents, and then the schools, universities, corporations, against the backdrop of media, government, society as a whole. We all have to work together. Now, my background and focus is business, and I have found that work experience, apprenticeships, at every level and stage work. Finally, CEOs are realising the importance of women and STEMs, but this needs to trickle down to middle management. Also in the UK, 50 years after the Equal Pay Act, women are still being paid less than men in almost every career. Also, parents need more flexibility in hours and location. People used to talk about the glass ceiling. Now we have to consider the leaky pipe and stop women leaving their careers at almost every point. In short, we need to find ways of turning this problem into an opportunity. Varkey GEMS has organised this forum to help bring about systemic change. A key initiative is to find ways of encouraging girls to study STEMs, and I'm very excited to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Just when we think we know all the numbers, there are more that we need to attend to, and you've certainly illuminated those, and it's even more dismal than we always think, isn't it? Sally?
Great. Well, I'm going to take the chair very literally when she said I can look at this problem from very many different angles, because my background is somewhat different. It's clear by my job title that most of my working life is actually dedicated to girls who don't even make it into the classroom initially, or who, when they make it, drop out very rapidly because of economic reasons or time pressures for other responsibilities at home, for example. However, I think rather than particularly maybe tackling the actual subject area, I think there is a continuity here which hopefully will make sense after my short intervention. So I think certainly in my experience in working in girls' education, we spent quite a lot of time on the barriers that actually stop girls getting through the door, and slightly less time at worrying about what happened to them once they got in the classroom. That was problematic for a number of reasons. One very serious reason, of course, was sometimes schools aren't necessarily a safe environment in some countries. So that was something we needed to. And the second, in many countries, was that the quality of education once girls got into the school wasn't sufficient for parents to feel that it was worth investing in that education. Now, obviously, different countries are different, and there's very many different contexts, but certainly for where we were focusing our investment in education, we were very much looking at those countries where there was a great need for the quality of education as well. More recently, I've been involved in an initiative called the Girls' Education Challenge, which the UK government launched about 12 months ago. The idea of this was very much actually speaking to what President Clinton said this morning, was there's always space for lots of different organisations to crowd into this area. So through this programme, we brought in private sector, non-state organisations to work alongside government in actually reaching the most marginalised girls. But more specifically and relevant, I think, to the discussions today, it's not just about getting girls in schools. We actually challenge these organisations to improve and understand why different girls in different contexts weren't learning successfully. So it was a competition, it was a challenge, and the organisations we've only actually just beginning to implement, we're funding because they have committed to improving girls' learning outcomes. And I think if we've got to start there, we've got to then get girls into secondary schooling, and through that process, I think we can then really look at making sure that they are encouraged to be whatever they want to be, and learn whatever subject area they want to be. But certainly in many countries, we have to start from that, and we have to start from learning. So specifically in terms of which subject area, I think there's still work to be done. But my hope is, and this is my last thought, is that we're actually going to learn in many poorer countries of some of the mistakes that we made in OECD countries or in the UK, certainly my own country, where we actually took our foot off the pedal. And when we talked about gender issues in education, we got very worked up about boys not learning in the last 10 to 20 years. And what we actually realised was girls were learning okay, but they weren't being encouraged to go into maths or engineering. And it's only in the last 2 or 3 years that policy makers have thankfully, and hopefully in time for my 7-year-old daughter, will actually be encouraging, incentivising girls and boys to do across the subject areas. So I think this could be one where countries that I'm more familiar with and working in will actually learn from the mistakes that so-called more developed countries have made in this particular area. So that's my comments on this.
Great. Thank you, Sally. Michael, you're our policy guy.
I don't know about that. Can I just begin by sort of spelling out the situation in the UK at least? First of all, the Confederation of British Industry, which seeks the views of employers on a regular basis. Over the last 3 years, the importance of different skill sets has changed dramatically. Right now, at the top of their list, they want young people with STEM skills. They also say quite clearly, we will pay them more than we'd pay people with other sorts of qualifications. We do, however, in trying to provide that, at least in UK, have a shortage of high-quality subject teachers in both maths and physics. There's a serious problem there. Reference has already been made to A-levels, but post-16, of all the A-level entries in the UK, only 6.2% of that total entry are studying A-level physics. And of that total entry, only 1.6% are girls. In other words, 4 times more boys than girls will be studying physics at A-level. Interestingly, the majority of A-level entries in these subjects come, or a large proportion, come from the independent schools. And secondly, you are 3 times more likely to find girls pursuing physics at A-level in an all-girls school than in a mixed school. And I think that raises a very interesting question about that issue of gender and so on. And there are some mixed schools now in England beginning to separate out girls from boys to teach some of the subjects like maths and physics and chemistry. It was only in 2002 in the UK that really policy began to be shaped around this issue of STEM. And it followed a report by the much lamented Sir Gareth Roberts. From that time onwards, the first initiative, and this reflects back to what President Clinton said this morning, the first initiative was a tripartite arrangement between government, that's the previous government in the UK, charities, in particular the Wellcome Foundation, and major companies, who all came together to say, we need to make sure that we have an improved science teaching body of people, both within our schools now and coming through. And they invested heavily together, most of it coming from the Wellcome Foundation. Over £50 million has been spent creating an absolute state-of-the-art National Science Learning Centre with accommodation and a whole series of regional centres to improve the quality of science teaching and to make sure in that particular attention was given to those teachers to attract girls. This is based at the University of York. What we have seen is that we have increased by over 50,000 the number of students doing the 3 separate sciences. We've seen an increase since 2002 in the numbers doing A-level physics and chemistry and mathematics. And we've also, importantly, seen an improvement in student attitudes to science and, importantly, and not surprisingly, an improved retention of teachers who now see that somebody is concerned about their professional development. We also have added to that centre a national STEM centre, again sponsored by charitable body, the Gatsby Foundation, created by Lord Sainsbury. This provides a resource for teachers. So all the materials from companies and other sources are on there. There are something like 7,500 free e-materials available and some 20-odd thousand that are physical resources. It gets 70,000 hits per month of teachers wanting to use these resources. The third element was what was known in the UK as STEMnet, STEM ambassadors. people who are currently employed in the a STEM career, giving up their time to go into schools, to talk with young people, to encourage them, and in some cases, to continue to mentor them as they make their pathway through the STEM. There are 25,000 of these now in the UK. 40% are female, and over half are under 35. I only stress the under 35 simply because they immediately see the role model from 17 and 18 onwards. In 2011, the final initiative, which I'm very much involved with, apart from the ones I've just spoken, is the establishment of a new sort of school in England, the University Technical College, sponsored by a university and supported by companies, who devise the projects that are used to study science and mathematics. At the moment, 50 have been approved by the government for funding. 17 are currently operative, and we have 500 companies involved in those 50, working with the schools to devise the projects. They're real projects. What we find is, once you give girls physics or chemistry that seems to have a purpose, that seems to have a relationship with the outside world, then all of a sudden their attention and their interest is sparked. And those involving higher education and employment, no pathway is closed. They're not making a career choice to be an engineer or to be STEM. They work, the days are longer, 8:30 till 5, and they work 40 weeks of the year. 8:30 to 5 is purposely. It's a working day for many people. It means that all the work on the projects is done in teams. We're developing teamwork skills. We're developing the so-called employability, soft skills, life skills. And so far, so good. But what are the problems? Well, I've referred to them. We still need more and better physics teachers. We also need to improve dramatically the information, advice and guidance available to young people through their schools and through their parents. Too many think that a STEM qualification ties them down to being a scientist or a technician or whatever. Actually, the STEM skills are widely applicable across a whole range of employment. We're quite clear that we need to start the STEM developments much lower down in schools, i.e. early years of primary school. And what is interesting, in the first UTC, which didn't have many girls, the sixth form, the 17, 18-year-old girls decided to innovate a program working with local primary schools specifically to encourage more girls to come forward when they were 14 into the University Technical College. So we can do that. The third area is we need to look very, very closely at integrating STEM ideas and STEM material into the broader curriculum. It isn't a subject in its own right. It's capable of being used in almost any subject in the curriculum if teachers have the necessary resource and confidence to do this. And finally, of course, all of that depends upon revision of curriculum and qualifications. We must get away from a curriculum and qualifications which value only knowledge and the regurgitation of that knowledge. We urgently need a curriculum and a qualifications which value skills. The fact we can't measure them in the same way is not a reason for not encouraging and recognising them. In fact, it's an even bigger reason for doing so, to find ways of expressing. We're on a journey in the UK. I believe the initiatives will work. They probably will deliver long after I've gone. But the important thing is we need to tackle it. We need to tackle it quickly. As we said, we are 100,000 engineers short per year going forward. If we don't solve that problem, we will not have an economic future. More importantly, we will have social disruption as well as a consequence. It's not a simple equation of education. It's about economics and social justice as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We will have to swing back to the learning question because each of you mentioned that in your own area. But I have of recent years thought we really need challenge the ROI, I being investment, not that we say that that's a bad thing, of course we need resources, but we need ways to look at the ROI of STEM in terms of ROI, inquiry, invention,
Yep.
innovation, inquisitiveness, imagination, all of those things, because that's, as you said, the habits of mind, of the scientific mind, but for all careers and endeavors. So Shabana, we sort of ended with you last night, and we're going to do that again today, and sort of give you the final word of your introductory comments, and then I'm going to circle back to the panel, and then shortly it will be your turn to see what questions or challenges or comments that you will have too. So.
Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and it's a great honor to be sitting on.
Can
on a
you
panel
hear
with all
okay?
these-
No, they cannot hear you.
Okay, I think it should be automatic. Can you hear me okay now? Okay. I wish I could start by saying we are 100,000 engineers short in Afghanistan each year. I think because we're a million, every single profession short in Afghanistan each year. The problems for us are extremely enormous. But it's really wonderful to hear to all these conversations and the urgency in different countries. In Afghanistan, it's a much, much deeper problem. First of all, we have, because of the 30 years of continuous war, we have a really high illiteracy rate for both men and women, and my focus is on women's and girls' education, simply because the illiteracy rate for women is even higher. It's around 90%. So we almost could look at it as a women's education being in danger, simply because it's not yet mainstreamed as part of everybody's daily life. So to tell you very quickly about how we in our school address some of these issues is our system in Afghanistan is based on rote learning. And I think it is the case still in many other countries, but there is a real danger in rote learning. It's the kind of system that, in my opinion, kills creativity and critical thinking and innovation. And if you think about it, maybe even for women's participation in STEM, maybe we need to look at different ways and methods of teaching to broaden students' interest in these subjects. And for our school, the focus is very much on introducing this new method of learning. In Afghanistan, unfortunately, one of the biggest fears of introducing critical thinking in education is this fear that people will start to question religion. Ironically, one of the things that is really highly encouraged in the religion of Islam, that you have to constantly question and ask questions to have a stronger faith, but that's not translated in the curriculum, so or in our schooling system. For me, this question of how do we make sure that everybody in a place like Afghanistan has access to quality education, one that allows critical thinking and nurtures that kind of environment, it's a big concern. And initially, when I was thinking of trying to make this a part of the public schooling system, I realized that because people in Afghanistan are so cynical, and how could they not be as a result of so many years of war, I had to start really small. And there's something that even Mr. Tony Blair mentioned, that you have to really start small. Don't be afraid of starting small and experiment before you scale up. So we at SOLA are trying to create this model where we allow a really safe space for students to learn in a new method. Ask questions, be critical thinkers, question the things they see around them, and especially their position in the society. Right now we're in the process of growing that. What becomes so critical for the school is that this idea, and I think this was mentioned, is mentoring. For young girls who come from different parts of the country to to have access to a one-on-one mentoring at least twice a week, people who get on Skype to work with them. It really gives them that sense. We sit down with our students and talk about what kind of professions they're interested in, and if they say they're interested in a business or in becoming engineer and so on, we try to connect them with mentors who are already in that profession, and it really does boost their confidence and self-esteem and so on. Our initial speaker talked about English medium education. For so many people who have been able to take advantage of such education, they take it for granted. But we at SOLA, we make sure that students take a language pledge to speak English at all times, appreciating the fact that the most up-to-date research and knowledge and the wealth of education and knowledge is available in English language. So for our students to be able to have access to all of that, we have decided to use English as the language of the school, even though we have so many other languages in the school. The other issue is that even in a place like Afghanistan, if you grow up as a woman in a city, your opportunities are already far better than girls who live in rural areas. And in Afghanistan, the majority of people do live in rural areas, and there you have that classic description of education denied for women, where girls reach puberty, they are taken out of school, where there are security problems that are preventing families from sending their daughters to school, or simply because of the lack of infrastructure in place. People have lived generations without having any kind of school in their local area. So we have started a boarding school for girls in Kabul city, and we have students from 14 different provinces. In a society like Afghanistan, it has so many advantages for young girls, where if they're at home, they have the responsibility of taking care of younger siblings and cooking and cleaning the house and so on. But when we put them in a boarding school situation, they have all that time for themselves, to focus on themselves, and it really creates a nurturing environment. And I will end with one note that in terms of STEM education, you're talking about the stereotypes in the US and the UK about women not being able to, women are not better, or men are better than women in this. Well, in places like Afghanistan, the advantage of this country is that we don't have that kind of stereotype in place. Simply, people haven't had this educational opportunity, so we don't have that stereotype, which I think is a great opportunity to see how giving access to young boys and girls in these fields, how it will play out. But the problem that we do have is, though, the career. You do see we do have a lack of female engineers, and that's because it's the kind of job that requires, at least right now in Afghanistan, for male and female engineers to travel a lot. The one profession of people who are highly targeted by the Taliban or the insurgents are engineers, because they do go to travel to villages. And so for families where they highly encourage their daughters to become doctors, which is in the sciences, they would not encourage them to become engineers, not because they are not good at it as a human being, but because they see so much danger for the woman in the field. So I encourage you that as you think about figuring out solutions to this problem in your countries, think about it in places like Afghanistan, where these stereotypes are not in place, but how could we reach out to more young girls and people in that country to take advantage of this education. And maybe you could find some of those 100,000 engineers from Afghanistan.
Thank you, Shavana. Thank you. Before we get to your questions, I want to invite everybody on the panel. Is there anything that you wish you had said that is just burning inside you, and so you want to say it now? Otherwise, I'm going to start connecting and asking some questions. But if there's anything else you really want to say, you haven't put your exclamation point yet on what you want to say, please do so now. I invite you.
It was mentioned, but I do want to
Okay.
emphasize this one point, and it doesn't have to be necessarily in STEM education. And maybe if we adopt this mindset, it may even help the STEM field. And that is really giving a purpose to education. So far, you see a lot of families, schools, especially private schools, approaching education, come to this school because this will be the best place for you. Or parents encouraging their children to have an education so that they could have a better life, they could have a stable future and have good, good careers and good family, go to vacation on these places and so on because they will have a good education. We really need to change that and talk about how education for one person can benefit more people. We do need to really look at it not from a selfless perspective, that my education is not just for me or my children's education is not just for them. How can they become leaders in their own fields? If everybody encouraged that sense of moral obligation and responsibility towards each other, not just within their own country but outside, thinking globally, we could start to see people from different countries, different religions, different walks of life working together to solve the problems that we face today.
Thank you. One of the things that I heard all of you say relates to learning, and you each gave different examples, whether it's mentoring or these universities that are now being created in the UK and technical, whether it's internships or apprenticeships. I'm interested if you are holding in your head what macro design principles go across everything. What are we saying that good, high-quality science, technology, engineering, and mathematics programs must have to make it more likely that young women would be invited into them and not have them seen as barriers? Each of you, I think, mentioned purpose, meaning. The research indicates girls want to change the world and they want to help people. And yet, when we look at science as siloed, as you said, Michael, they're not subjects to be taken. They're habits of mind to be developed and acquired. How are you thinking about whether it's the programs, the mentorship programs, Amanda, or some of the things that you're doing, Sally, or each of you? What has to be present in a really high-quality STEM program, whether it's a school curriculum or a mentorship program or even a policy initiative that says this is what science is? Anybody?
Well, I think from my perspective, first of all, I take as read that you have highly qualified, enthusiastic, knowledgeable teachers as an absolute precursor. Beyond that, I think what is quite clear is that the science that is taught and the way in which it is taught needs to change to bring alive the science in its everyday context. This can only be done, in my view, by harnessing employers in providing that real context. And in some cases, of course, providing the staff. So in the schools that we're just creating, the new ones, all of the teams are mentored by people from the companies. And they are bringing that subject alive. The students have to go occasionally into the company to carry out some of their practical work because the equipment's there and it's ridiculous to have it in the school. And so it's the bringing alive. We find that just as an example, the first of the university technical colleges, the students joining them at 14, the schools they came from, expected and predicted that about 50% of them would get GCSE mathematics grade A to C, which is the normal benchmark. By involving mathematics with their engineering and their science, at the end of the 2 years that they were then at school, 85% of those same students got GCSE maths A to C, simply because the mathematics was now real. It wasn't an abstract study. It was real. It was seen to be real. It was being seen to be applied. And suddenly you turn on in the proper sense, students who previously, why do I want to be bothered with mathematics? Why should I be bothered with science? Bring it alive. But you can only do it by working with universities and with employers.
Mike, I totally agree with you, but I think a lot of young girls are put off at a very early stage in life. I think it almost starts with the sort of the parents in, the stereotypical toys that a lot of parents give kids. For instance, Legos. We had sort of such a wonderful preparation for being an engineer as a pack of Legos, and then suddenly we start getting Friends Legos. Why do we need pink Legos? It's
Well, I understand, what you said, but I think that, it does start. One of the most worrying things that's come out of some recent research is that it is families with science capital within them that are more likely to see their children pursue careers in STEMs. In STEM subject. That is quite worrying because there are too many families with no or little science capital. And the challenge for education is to get over that, not to accept it and say, oh, well, that's it. We've got to get over it.
And also we need to look at the teachers.
Definitely.
For instance, in the UK, we actually take the top 30% of graduates. Let's look at Finland and Korea, where they take the top 10%. That's a big difference. And also I've got a lot of statistics. 85% of all primary teachers in the UK are women. So if they're not happy with the STEMs or they don't see a reason to study STEMs, that's very quickly going to sort of trickle down to the girls they're teaching.
The notion of science capital, I think, is a really powerful one for us in this group, because the metaphor of a pipeline and scarcity, I don't think is a helpful one. I think we're talking really about what's the broader ecosystem of building the science capacity of families, of schools, of teachers, of communities, working with business. So now it is your turn. You've gotten just a flavor of how people are beginning to think on this panel, and we know you have enormous expertise out there, so please fire away. Yes, sir. And please direct your question to the panel as opposed to an individual. And make sure it is a question and it's not tempting to grandstand with a particular philosophy. So please ask a question.
Okay, I'd like to address this question to Michael. My name is my name is Rolando.
Already
Junior
a radical, not listening to what the moderator has asked you to do. Okay, go ahead.
I'm from the Global Education First Initiative Youth Advocacy Group. I've worked with blind girls in the Philippines, and it's quite frustrating to note that as much as they want to incline themselves in STEM subjects, facilities and the system itself are not responsive to their needs. So how do we make sure that STEM subjects are accessible to girls with disabilities? Thank you.
My first thing is we need to talk to them. I mean, let me just give you a simple example from way back. Most science courses involve study of radioactivity, particularly in physics. But the whole emphasis of that curriculum is about its harmful effects, its structure and harmful effects. It's never, ever talked about is its positive effects through medicine. Its use in treating cancer, for example. Once you get onto that sort of application and talking about it in those terms, you very quickly attract the attention of girls. So it is about the curriculum, it's also about how it's presented. It's both together. The content is, if you just get the content right and you don't have the inspirational teacher and the context, that's no good, or vice versa. So my answer is, what turns on girls turns on boys, by the way. There's no sort of, it doesn't work for boys. It does. It works for boys and girls. But particularly, I think we've got to talk to the girls about what interests them in terms of their interest in science and technology.
If you don't remember anything else on this panel, you can tell people we talked about what turns on girls and boys. That could be really dangerous territory. Another question.
It's only one of the things that turns them on.
Good. STEM turns on girls and boys. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Julius. I work with Vaki James Foundations. I'm a trainer in Uganda. I want to ask about your comment on the role of the examination systems, because in Uganda, like it is in Afghanistan, the rote learning is a common aspect. And a lot of girls, and so it is to the boys, will want to do those subjects where they will be able to perform well, because the examination system is a criteria of determining who is successful and who is not. So more often than not, you'll find that girls would move in quickly, get these subjects, the English and the art subjects, liberal subjects, pass the exams, and they fly out. So I want your comment on how we could be able to use the examination system to influence the involvement of girls in scientific studies. Thank you very much.
Who wants to tackle that one, the exam system?
I don't mind coming in because I think what's an interesting comment that's come out sort of beyond the whole STEMS debate actually is about teaching methodology. I think, you know, I'm not a scientist, I'll, you know, say that up front. I did maths A level though, did okay in it. But, but I slightly worry when we sort of we over egg one particular area or one particular set of skills, because where I'm coming from is that every young person should have the capacity to be able to choose which direction, but also that society values it. So I am coming to respond to you in a minute, but this is just to follow up a little bit about sometimes how policies can distort. So if all of a sudden we start incentivizing STEM subjects, but we don't address the fact that girls and boys aren't doing it, you'll end up actually giving boys and young men much more economic opportunities than girls. So you have to make sure that you do it alongside, or you have a system that actually addresses the existing inequality there. But on the examination system, I think you're right. I think in a way, in so many countries, in so many situations, and even in the UK actually, very often teachers teach the test as opposed to bringing out their students. So I think we have this challenge everywhere. So I think it starts with what you were discussing actually, looking at what's going on in the classroom, but at the same time policymakers and people who have influence actually making sure that then the national education system values and understands that change so they work together. I don't think you can separate them out.
We have time for one more question.
Hi. You mentioned a lot about how it's sort of you're talking about looking at them from 14 years and starting later on. Do you not believe that you need to start a bit earlier with that representation? Because, like, if I work with the early years, and if you ask them what they want to do, it's already there. They want to be the girls want to be teachers, they want to be nurses. And by the time you get to 14 and 15, you already have that in your head about what you want to do, and you've not had the experiences, the opportunities, and the exposure to the STEM subjects. So do you not think that you need to begin a bit earlier with that representation?
I think you're going to get a resounding amen from everyone, but that's a comment.
Yes, I mean, in the UK, all young people from the age of 5 are studying science. It's not an option right the way through to 16. But I think the important thing that I would stress is so the study there and design technology and all the rest is there in the curriculum. What is not there yet is the information young people need to understand about the careers and opportunities in STEM. That's what's got to start. We tend to start, sadly, with information, advice and guidance from the age of about 14 or 15, when we should be starting it almost from not in a hard sense, but we should be using materials and using people, role models, that actually indicate the power and usefulness and the sheer sense of excitement that people get from careers in this area. So yes, I entirely agree. And I said at the end, one of the challenges we've got is how we can get some of this material lower down in the system from, basically, as far as I'm concerned, back to Lego, from birth in a way. On that point though, what I find rather difficult to reconcile is in the UK, when information technology became a subject in the curriculum, it had no gender history. Yet, the result is it's almost entirely dominated by boys, and so are many of the careers. That did not become from some social stereotyping beforehand.
Yeah,
it's a very interesting phenomenon.
Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, in Estonia, coding and programming is actually part of the curriculum at primary school, but very early age. So everybody just sees it as part of everyday curriculum.
Yeah, Girls That Code is a big movement now in the U.S. I want to please join me in thanking our panel.